are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. It's Monday night at 9 p.m. and time for Sex Talk with the Sigel Brothers. Dr. Ricky Sigel is a certified sex therapist, educator, and supervisor, and his brother Larry Sigel is a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator. The Sigel Brothers are here to answer all your questions about sex and sexuality, but we're unsure who to ask, including questions you didn't even know you had. They will also welcome guests from around the globe to talk about a wide variety of topics and issues within the fascinating world of sexuality. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to Sex Talk.
Good evening, and welcome to Sex Talk with the Sigel Brothers. My name is Dr. Richard Sigel. I'm a certified sex therapist.
And I'm Larry Sigel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator.
Thank you for joining us. We're very honored to have a guest in the studio with us this evening, Ms. Susan Proctor, I'm sorry. And we'll introduce her momentarily, but let's do the call letters first.
Yes,
We're
indeed.
On the radio in South Florida on 95.3 FM and 1470 AM. Our call-in number, if you want to join the conversation on Sex Talk, is 888-565-1470.
You don't have it memorized at this point?
Usually over there. 888-565-1470.
Yes.
Got it.
So.
And we're live streaming on Facebook. So if
Yes.
you're watching us on Facebook, hello. Thank you for joining us. And please hit the like and share
Yes.
button copiously.
Yes, indeed. So
And,
anything going on this week before we sort of jump in?
No, nothing comes to mind. I'm eager to hear what our guest has to talk about this evening. So let's jump right into it.
Okay, then let's go. Let me go ahead
Fascinating
and
topic. I'm sorry I got your name wrong right out of the gate.
no worries, no worries. Just a little from your bio. Susan Joyce Proctor. You go by Susan Joyce or just Susan?
I go by Susan, but when I left the corporate world, I went from being Susan J. Proctor to Susan Joyce Proctor.
That middle part always kind of
I love the
sticks
fact
with
that there's
you.
joy in the middle of my name.
Sure.
Plus, my ex-husband used to call me Susan Juice Proctor, so I think there's something to
There's
that.
something
you know?
there.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah, maybe a little foreshadowing, especially as the CEO of Get Your Juicy Back. And apparently for like the last 30 years or so, after you've had your career change from the corporate world, been helping women on all kinds of journeys toward their wellness, their ideas of letting go, fulfillment, self-expression, personal growth,
All
a lot
great
of that
stuff. And I'm a baby boomer. Right smack in the middle of the baby boom generation. And there are very, as you guys well know, there are really very specific wellness and sexuality issues that happen, after 50 and after menopause. And after I went through that, I was realizing that, among other things, of course, a lot of people are just not comfortable even discussing those things.
Yeah.
So,
can you talk a little bit about how you came into talking with your first company, Get Your Juicy Back, the name and just the
I'll give you the
purpose.
short version of a really long story. I was once upon a time a vice president of a bank in New York City. I had started doing yoga, had a spiritual wake up, left that career, got into the wellness field. And Ayurvedic medicine has been the primary modality that I've studied and worked with. And that, for listeners who maybe don't know, is a sister science to yoga that has a really deep, beautiful spiritual model and a lot of similar energetics to Chinese medicine.
Thousands of years of history.
Thousands of years of history and a great deal to say about rejuvenation. And after I went through menopause and, had gotten divorced, I was having some issues. And I had studied with a really wonderful naturopath who taught me about natural hormone balance and restoral. And I came up with this awareness that I call Mother Nature's backup plan that very few people and very few doctors seem to know about. That, there's an expectation in our culture, and you and I were chatting about that a few minutes ago, Larry, that, at a certain point in life, people just sort of expect that they're going to dry up and dry out and kind of give up on certain aspects of their lives.
Yeah.
And there's even a belief that, physiologically that's what happens, that after menopause, things dry up. And it turns out that that's really not the case.
Well, that was kind of the revolution of hormone replacement, right? That men used to age gracefully and women hit the wall. but it's really just about hormones and estrogen.
It is.
The idea of turning into, your great-grandma with the question mark spine and the bone so fragile she smashes a hip when she bumps into a chair. That's estrogen depletion.
It is.
Right.
It absolutely is. And I guess what is a little different about the approach that I learned is I don't use the term replacement, and I don't even necessarily. Okay, I consider it. I consider bioidentical hormone replacement to be an appropriate last resort. But what I have learned is that Mother Nature had a backup plan, and that we are actually capable of producing estrogen after menopause. It works through a different channel.
Wow.
And so when I talk about get your juicy back, I literally got my juicy back. And most women, and I think most professionals, don't know that that really is even available to us. So I found that to be a tremendously exciting discovery, both personally and professionally. And that's where Get Your Juicy Back came from. And although, I have wellness information for women, across the life cycle, because, a lot of the nutrition and lifestyle things we can do for ourselves are the same, at any age. And I always say, the more balanced we get earlier, the better off we are. But I had gotten myself really balanced enough that I went through a really, easy textbook menopause. And I know that that's available to most women. And I think there's a tremendous, education thing. And just to, elaborate on this a little bit, what I learned primarily is that the reason that most women do not access Mother Nature's backup plan is that we live in such a stressed out world that by the time women are 50, their adrenal glands are just shot. And it's actually the adrenals that were designed to pick up the slack.
Adrenal fatigue that seems to be so widespread.
Right.
And also when we're pumping out, massive quantities of cortisol, which is a sex hormone, the stress hormone, we're literally using up the nutrients and precursors that would otherwise be available to make estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. So I have seen this kick back in.
Wow.
Both. Is that not exciting?
Yeah, it's the same thing that kickstarts puberty in kids.
Kinda.
Right?
There's a natural process, and we can work with the body. And one of the things that was so tremendously exciting to me over the years, and I used to quote myself saying, cortisol is the problem, and oxytocin is the solution. So I've had a platform here, we're laughing, you get it, that's very pleasure-oriented, because oxytocin is a pleasure hormone and it antidotes cortisol. So I've really been promoting this platform that's very pleasure-oriented. Of all the things that support oxytocin production, from, dancing and singing to women hanging out with girlfriends to, kissing and hugging, and obviously sex and orgasm, massive.
Well, you have to put that in there because vaginal distension is one of the biggest triggers for some of the largest releases of oxytocin.
So I had quoted myself for years. I was really proud of that. Cortisol is the problem and oxytocin is the solution. I was kind of like branding myself with that message.
Nice.
And isn't it? It's very cool.
Yes,
and I have a whole
cortisol
protocol
is poison.
that's about helping women reduce cortisol and balance their blood sugar, which is the other thing we can do to support
Also
hormone
related
balance.
to estrogen.
Also, so I have a very wonderful, very individualized approach for women. And I'm a foodie, so I come at this from a very, I'm not into deprivation. So I really, for myself and others, what do you enjoy the most? Let's match that up with what's good for you and all of that stuff. So I've had this very pleasure-oriented
This guy's
platform.
brilliant self-taught chef.
Okay,
Very
so
healthy
we
one.
do some cooking together.
After a certain little cardiac procedure, an extremely healthy one.
Well, I didn't actually. I came to it by choice, which I'm happy to say. And then within the last year and a half, one of the things that I've added to this platform, which has been so exciting because it was a new discovery, is about CBD. Because for those, at a year and a half ago, I didn't know much of anything about CBD, and I didn't know very many people who did. Now it's everywhere.
Yeah, I was going to say,
that's kind of the problem.
Over the course of that last
You
year,
had to throw
if
that in.
any
That's
of our
part of the problem.
listeners or viewers on Facebook happen to be watching from inside a cave or under a rock and have not heard of CBD, it's the non-psychoactive part, or one of many cannabinoids from the cannabis plant, derisively known as marijuana, in our first drug war.
That's right.
And it seems to be like just continuously unlocking more and more.
It's unbelievable.
Doors.
You know, as you guys probably know, most of the research has come out of Israel at this point,
Right.
because it hasn't been legal here to study, and we're coming out of the reefer madness, misinformation now, and I'm really
It's only
honored to
taken
be.
a century.
Well,
Literally.
but isn't that's a big part of the irony. I mean, you have something that for the better part of 10,000 years has been a very important, significant medicine and a root of many rituals in every religious tradition. It has been a food source. People have been eating seeds,
Hemp seeds are an unbelievable
since
protein.
as even
I know.
far beyond written history. But it's only really been the last 80 years, last 80 to 100 years that it's been so demonized. But it's stuck. It went so deep, that reefer madness thing.
Well, it was not an accident, as
Oh,
we
no,
all
of
know.
course
We
not.
have all the
By the way,
economic and political.
it's all the same rhetoric that we're hearing today about the same brown people that are coming in, threatening the same white people with all of their stuff. And you pointed out that the term marijuana is a derisive term.
I kind of think of it
it's
as
a
its
racist
slave
term.
name. That's why we're calling it cannabis, which I learned was historically the menopause solution. Throughout. In fact, I learned something really. I'm learning about this all the time. It's one of the most exciting things that I going on in my world. That there are more CB receptors in the uterus than any other organ in the body. This is a gift for women.
If I may,
Please.
there's nothing to back that up. That's one of
okay.
those claims that a couple of these websites, but we're not actually allowed to say some of them
okay.
by name.
Okay.
That they
Then I
say
stand
that a
corrected.
lot. No, I mean it's one of those, and this is what I do want to sort of put out there as just a general idea. I am so an advocate of all of this. I want to preface this by
Okay.
saying that, and I am scared to death that the way things are going, it's going to end up the way of snake oil. There's too much hype.
There's too much
I think,
bad CBD being sold in gas
well, I mean, aside from
stations
mislabeling
and 7-Elevens
and all that kind of stuff, and that there's no standardization in the production, especially of hemp. Based products. There's zero labeling consistency. There's no standardization. But what we have, I mean, we have to also be very careful. We can never say the word will,
Okay.
can,
Yeah.
but I think we have to really, and this is where I think it's hard to sometimes temper the excitement, because we are on the precipice of most just unbelievable potentials. And CBD is, it's getting really most of the hype, but CBG, I think, is going to prove to be
dozens of
even
others.
more. CBND is going to be, I think, even more. And when we start really looking at the potential for all of these other cannabinoids and going even beyond those to the precursor chemicals and go beyond to the acid forms that
Right.
really are, I would say, are almost like cannabinoid stem cells.
It's an interesting way. I want to just take a step back, because I am passionate about the education aspect of this. So just for members of the audience who may not be up to speed, I just want to explain that it was discovered a couple of decades ago in Israel that as mammals, human beings have an endocannabinoid system.
Yes. Right.
That's the major homeostatic system in the body that balances everything
Those are
else.
our own naturally occurring.
Right. So we produce these
Cannabinoids. That's
chemicals
right.
in the
Right.
body,
That's right.
and those are the endocannabinoids.
Just like
Right,
we have
right.
endogenous morphine in the form
Exactly.
of
Exactly,
endorphins
exactly.
and ephedrins.
So this plant has the similar compounds to what the body already produces.
Right.
So when we're talking
Phytocannabinoids.
phytocannabinoids. So when we're talking about the receptors, that's what we're talking about.
They're
And I just
already there.
Right.
they're already
Right.
there.
Right.
Well,
and thank you for correcting
and-
me, because I learned that
No,
from
no,
a
no,
nurse.
correction.
No,
Just a caution, because this is still,
Right.
like Larry said, this is all like really.
But again, I'm
new.
passionate about education.
Right,
I don't want to
right.
be misinforming.
So, but they are, and we do have the CB, particularly CB1 receptors throughout. Actually, it's you can't really say. It's easy to say. The simplistic way is that we have CB1 receptors primarily through our central nervous system, And the CB2 receptors are primarily in our homeostatic systems.
All well and good.
Peripheral, but the point is,
you're getting too nerdy.
I know, but the point I want to make is they're all over. They're in every system. They do not have those clear lines. And one of the best words I've ever heard to describe these cannabinoids, these chemicals, and their relationship to the chemical receptors in our body is promiscuous. That
interesting word to be talking about sexuality.
Exactly. Cannabinoids.
Explain that one, doctor.
Cannabinoids are promiscuous, meaning they do not only target or stimulate cannabinoid receptors. They're also got a widespread effect on many other receptor populations, including things like dopamine, serotonin. We see what's going on in the adrenal glands. For me, and this is what we also, I think, need to look at connections in. We've talked before about this new drug for women for sexual desire.
Bremelanotide.
Yeah, bremelanotide, which is basically it's a melanocortin type of drug. Now, we have these melanocortin systems in our body.
I bet cannabinoids stimulate those receptors.
Yes.
I was waiting for that.
They absolutely do. Even though they have some preliminary, and most of it is non-human studies. Which is most of the cannabinoid research in non-human studies. But I think it's really exciting that even though they're independent, they're separate mechanisms, those metabolic pathways, these melanocortins, are parallel to the cannabinoid pathways.
Wow.
And even though we really can't say what the relationship is, we haven't identified a real link between especially female sexuality and the cannabinoids, but we know it's there.
I just want to know what the future of vaginal cannabinoid suppositories is, because there's a lot of anecdotal stuff that sounds incredibly promising.
Yes.
I don't know about, getting body parts stoned specifically, but
I've heard about that for younger women, who have debilitating cramps, that it's fairly miraculous.
That it works locally before it goes systemic. We were talking about that earlier.
And particularly, and that's one of those things too. And again, this is part of the learning curve stuff too that I get so excited about too. When it comes to dosing, we have no idea with any of this, but it seems that, again, can't say by name, but that one company out of California that has a vaginal suppository, and where most of the dosing ranges are like 10 to 30 milligrams, they're putting this out there at 60 milligrams.
Wow.
Right, which is pretty high.
Yeah.
I mean, especially in
quite a bit.
Such a single dose.
Right.
But that seems to be where again, it's all self-report. We got to certainly throw that caveat out there. But the consistent self-reports seem to be greater sense of enjoyment, the subjective feeling of arousal, the subjective enjoyment of the orgasm seem to be reported at much higher rates.
Well, there seem to be two different aspects, in my view, of how CBD can really support sexual health. And I would say one of them is in the area of pleasure and arousal, kind of more directly, of what you're speaking about, of relaxation and perhaps some other anecdotal evidence that I've read that may not be substantiated about brain centers in women and how that's supported. And then to me, the other is about the hormone balance itself, because for women of my generation, as we were speaking about, insufficient estrogen is a major obstacle to sexual pleasure. So what I discovered, and I'll bounce this off you because I feel like I came up with this explanation myself, even though that may not be completely accurate, but I was talking about cortisol earlier. And to me, cortisol is the problem of all of the issues that I support women with, weight, sleep,
I believe
hormone
that's what
balance,
ages
premature
us.
aging, exactly.
Yeah.
It's all cortisol.
It's
And,
like
and as I
revving
was
the
saying
gas
earlier, I
pedal.
had quoted myself, cortisol is the problem, oxytocin is the solution. And oxytocin is wonderful. And I obviously continue to advocate pleasure. But I started taking CBD myself because I was learning about the benefits. So the same way you would say, oh, I'm going to take vitamin D or magnesium because I've read about it, and I believe that that's beneficial for me. I started taking CBD, not to address any particular issue, because I'm very, very lucky. I didn't have any specific issues or pain that I was seeking to balance. I just was curious about the effect. And I remember one of the first lectures I went to, doctor speaking about the health benefits of cannabis. Nobody was using the word cortisol. And I specifically asked him, I said, I'm not a doctor, I'm a wellness practitioner. Cortisol is one of the major things I address. Is it accurate to say that, the therapeutic use of the plant can reduce cortisol? And he said, yes, of course. But so I had been speaking about it that way. But I had an experience of it myself, and I refined my explanation that I want to bounce this off you because I think this is stupendous. What I've been experiencing is not simply that using CBD is reducing cortisol. I'm actually experiencing that CBD is so effective about conditioning the endocannabinoid system, for myself, speaking subjectively, that I'm actually aware at a moment in my life that I'm under a fair amount of pressure, and I know how my system usually responds to that, that I'm aware of the cortisol channel for the most part not even kicking in. And that, to me, is way more, I see, Richard, you're excited about this too, that's way more beneficial than like undoing something, because, cortisol production is adaptive. It's protecting the body from stress, but it has so many side effects. And in our culture, it's become so chronic that to be balanced enough that we can adapt to the stresses of life in a more functional way and not have to, that the body doesn't even have to go the cortisol channel, is what I've been experiencing. So I'm not going to say it's even better than oxytocin, but it's another amazingly valuable tool that I didn't know about before.
But I would say, again, it's...
So I'm curious what that sounds like to you.
It wouldn't be a one or the other. Right?
No, it doesn't need to be a choice, but it's another tool.
Well, I think, but it's also, maybe an example of how all this stuff works together. See, we tend to look at these systems, our neurochemical systems, our hormonal systems, like they're linear. And they're the most circuitous things we can possibly imagine. So when you look at, the cortisol, now, is it that framing that you had? We don't know, obviously, but I think when we look at our nervous system, it is flexible, right? That is what that plasticity is. And, with our behavior patterns, we do condition our adrenals. We do condition these systems to have these reactions and squirt at certain triggers and things like that. And maybe that the CBD helped you do is recondition these pathways. You're responding a little bit different, a little bit more in line with your own balance and equilibrium. And I think maybe that's one of those things that we can sort of look at.
It feels like a higher level of functioning.
Because that would also have some sort of impact on oxytocin.
Sure.
Seemingly.
Right.
That would make sense, putting all that together.
Right.
And I think that's what we see a lot with, I think, the connection with cannabinoids and sexuality, particularly women's sexuality. That I think it really is a lot about, since we can't really say anything about what's happening with the plumbing. We really can't. But there is that sort of, that whole experience that allows, I think, women in particular to connect. Guys, too, when we talk about even things like rapid ejaculation and ED, that whole mindfulness part of it, that the cannabinoids and even the non-psychoactive ones still kind of help, because they have a lot of these other sort of effects that go along with them that we can hopefully try to tap into.
Plus, even without being able to define them, as you're reminding us, because we can't define everything, to me, my plants are made from the same stuff that we are. I have tremendous respect for the life force. And to me, that's what Get Your Juicy Back has sort of evolved into. It's gone like way beyond the issue of vaginal dryness. Juice, as I was saying earlier, is about like this life force thing that animates
and a symbiosis.
us. Right.
So please,
that's a part of that.
Before we run out of time, tell us about the wellness retreat.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to
I
make
was
sure to
gonna
do
ask
that because
Yes.
I'm going to be speaking more about this topic with another an amazing panel of women. It's coming up really soon. We have
Right.
an amazing retreat
It's
next
July
week.
July
can
19th to 21st.
Can we don drag and crash the party?
Well, what you're welcome to do is join us for the concert Saturday night. So let me just say a little
go
bit.
ahead, please.
This event, it's a Women's Cannabis Wellness Retreat, and it's taking place at the Wyndham Hotel in Deerfield Beach, so just down the road from here. And the full program is going to be taking place from Friday evening through Sunday morning. And women are welcome to come for the whole weekend, for Saturday only, for one night, for 2 nights. We have a kind of special Shabbat Friday night evening and belly dancing celebration because you were mentioning that cannabis has deep roots in many traditions. One of them is the Jewish tradition.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
deep
That's kind of where the
spiritual
word
roots.
cannabis kind of came from.
Cannabosim is described in the Torah.
Really?
Yeah.
And most of the research has come out of Israel, so there's a very deep connection between the plant and Jewish people.
Absolutely.
And we have an amazing woman named Shira Adler, who was a cantor who left the pulpit to become a cannabis advocate. And she's going to be leading a very special service that is not just for Jewish women. It's really about
Mishpacha.
mishpacha, but the divine feminine, and really that celebration. And then Saturday we have an amazing roster of speakers. Dr. Michelle Weiner is one of the most
One of my
prominent
favorite
Been
people.
a guest on our show before.
Yes, she's just amazing.
She is wonderful.
Many of the women happen to be Jewish, not necessarily everybody, but Dr. Weiner will be there. Aslina Siegel is a cannabis attorney that's going to be helping us navigate the legal stuff. I'm going to be speaking on this topic, which obviously is very exciting to me. We were speaking about Shemaya Cha, who's a CBD expert. She's going to be leading us through a guided massage with CBD. We have a woman coming down, Laura
Send her
Logano.
our love,
Oh,
please.
I will. It sounds like we're family. Laura Logano is going to be joining us from New Jersey. She's a functional nutritionist. So we've
Perfect.
designed some amazing menus
Excellent.
along those lines. So
perfect.
this is coming up next week. As I said, we've got tickets available for all or any part of the program, and I do want to make sure to share the website where women
Women's
can
yes.
find that out.
CannabisRetreats.com.
Yes.
Women's
So
Cannabis.
women's,
Cannabis
yeah, all
retreats.
one word.
Good.
It's
We've got
up on
that
the
here,
screen there if
and
you're on
you
Facebook
got
page.
everything right. And I
Yeah.
also just want to mention that this retreat is being sponsored by some wonderful companies that we're very happy to be representing, including True Leave, which is one of the wonderful MMTCs here in Florida,
products.
and Grow Healthy and Rise are all participating and supporting us with this, as well as some other organizations. So we're so excited to be able to provide this. We had a smaller event of this type in Miami in March, and it was tremendously successful. We handpicked our vendors. We had sound healing going
Wonderful.
on. It's going to be
Good.
really
Very, very
transformational,
good.
community,
So folks,
spiritual, educational thing.
Know how to
Excellent.
find out more info. But the
So-
music is playing, so you know what that means?
Right.
It's our
Oh, it
time
went so
for
fast.
This.
It was
I
so
know,
much
it's
fun.
Always
Thank you
fun.
so much for
unfortunately how it
having
happens.
me.
Thanks for
So much
joining
for
us.
coming.
We'll have to
Appreciate it.
continue this another time.
I would be delighted.
So in the meantime, Larry and I will be back here next Monday and every Monday at 9 o'clock for Sex Talk with the Sigel Brothers.
Yes, indeed. Have a great night and have a great week. Thank you.
You've been listening to Sex Talk with the Sigel Brothers. Join us every Monday night at 9 p.m. on WNN, 1470 AM and 95.3 FM. Or watch live streaming video at AMP2 TV Productions on Facebook, or look for the shows on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again next week.